Okay, so let's talk about this, because on the one hand, yeah, Katniss's mother basically does abandon her twice over the course of the series. The first time is after Katniss's father's mine accident, when we find Katniss actively hiding the family's financial and physical health-wise situation from the government well before the books even start, and then also at the end of Mockingjay. And this commenter's sentiment is super common across the fandom. Everybody has really just a total lack of compassion and sympathy for Astrid. And I don't totally put myself in that camp, because this is a woman who at age 16-ish lost her best friend, then watched that best friend's twin sister spiral into a really horrible mental health situation. We know by the time of Catching Fire that Marilee, now Undersea, is basically non-functional as a person and is relying on sleep syrup to get her through the days, as well as Morphling. Also, Astrid's person's best friend comes back from the games and is so combative and violent towards them, and Astrid doesn't know why. And he throws a rock and hits her in the forehead, and then her person, then husband, doesn't have a best friend anymore. And then they have 2 kids, and you have to imagine in this book's universe, having kids is an immediate source of fear, because the games are in the picture. All the while she's living in economic circumstances that are absolutely nothing like what she grew up in. And from Sunrise, we now have a clue that the financial circumstances of District 12 across the board get worse and worse as the chronology shifts in the series. 12 is poor in Ballad, but it's functional. Everybody's capable of existing and having an okay life. Everybody in Sunrise is able to get a decent meal on the table, including people in the Seam who are living off of a single mother's income. And we know perfectly well that that is not the case by Katniss's time. And Astrid lives through that. And then her husband dies in a mine accident. And she absolutely disappears into the grief. And yes, she basically abandons her 2 kids at that time. Now, keep in mind, Astrid is the closest thing that this town has to a doctor. Physical healthcare is not available, let alone mental health care. Now, therapists exist in District 13 and in the capital, kind of, sort of. We know that there's a guy named Dr. Aurelius who treats Katniss at the end of Mockingjay. But therapy to somebody like Astrid is pretty much a foreign concept. And the thing is, Astrid does not cut off contact with Katniss. It's the other way around. Even Astrid gets better and is actively trying to be there again, Katniss shuts her out. Sure, that's kind of reasonable. But there's a whole exchange between the 2 of them in Catching Fire where Astrid is trying to take care of Katniss and trying to be a mom to her, and Katniss just can't let her. It's really hard for both of them, and that's before any of the really terrible shit in Mockingjay happens to either of them. Prim is more easily forgiving. Prim forgives Astrid much more readily. And don't forget that there's some degree of bonding that would have happened between Astrid and Prim, whether they liked it or not, without Katniss, because they're sitting there watching Katniss fight for her life in the games. Twice. And then she goes to District 13, and finally, all of that healing knowledge is really useful because she's able to be a nurse in the hospitals, and she's able to use all of that knowledge and all of that experience with much better resources. And she watches her youngest kid follow in her footsteps, and she's beginning to come back to life. She's got a sense of usefulness and purpose that she's never really had before. And she's showing real signs of trying to be a caring figure for other people again, too. We see her step in with Johanna's medical care. We see her step in for Katniss's prep team in a way that nobody else really does. And it's pretty clear that she's doing that because Katniss won't let her take care of her, but she'll let her take care of her friends. So that's what Astrid's trying to do. And then the worst of the worst happens, and Prim does not survive. We are under the impression that while Katniss is definitely a little bit suicidal, for a full couple of chapters before she even goes to shoot coin, Astrid is the one taking care of her. Katniss hears her mother's voice in her dreams. And then she catches a scent and it's oh, there's Astrid, there's her mother. But the sheer magnitude of loss that lady has been through. And then to find out, because we find out at the end of Mockingjay that therapists have existed in this space this whole time, just only for the Capitol and District 13 and probably nobody else. For her to find out that there's a treatment path that she could have gone down and just didn't have access to. And that she's a nurse and a medic with all of this experience and all of these resources, and she still couldn't save her youngest kid, and she still couldn't do anything really for the daughter who still won't talk to her, who won't let her mother her. Is it a good move? Maybe not, but I wouldn't want to go back to the town where all of that happened either. I wouldn't want to go back to a town haunted by the faces and memories of everybody that I'd lost over all of those years. So no, I am not surprised in the slightest that Astrid does not go back to 12 with Katniss at the end of Mockingjay, partially because I don't think that Katniss would have let her. And I also don't hold to the idea that Astrid has completely abandoned Katniss for a couple of reasons. The phone in Katniss's house never really stops ringing. It's constantly ringing, and Katniss is constantly ignoring it. And yes, we know that sometimes it is her therapist who she is ignoring. But I think it's also a safe bet that some of it is her mother, some of it is Astrid. And we know that Astrid stays in 4. And we know that she is building a hospital. We know that she is trying to make something new out of all of the rubble. Now, what else arrives to District 12 in the mail from 4? A picture of Annie's baby. A picture of Finnick and Annie's child. And if Katniss won't let Astrid be a mother to her, Annie certainly needs the help. And Astrid has been through, not the same trauma certainly, but a similar degree of loss and chaos and disruption to her life. Of course she's there for Annie. It makes sense. And in a lot of ways, Annie makes sense as a stand-in for Katniss to Astrid. So I don't really think of it entirely like abandonment. I actually think that Astrid is one of the more interesting characters in the series when we look at all of them as a commentary on child endangerment and child soldiers, and the circumstances that adults are willing to place children in for the purpose of proving a point. And like that hits even harder knowing that Suzanne Collins is from Newtown and has already written a whole other series on child soldiers. I think it's really interesting to have this character of an absent mother figure who is trying her best, but who isn't really allowed to be as much of a mother as she wants to be. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.